Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. That's right, it's finally time to talk about the Epiphone 2020 Firebird 5. So for the year 2020, Epiphone revamped their whole lineup and mirrored what Gibson did in 2019. I mean, we've talked about this quite a few times. There's now an original collection and a modern collection. But for all the shapes that aren't Les Pauls and SGs, they grouped them together in something called the Original Designer Series. And what makes these instruments unique is the fact that they do not get the new Epiphone headstock. They get something that more closely resembles the Gibson variation. And these models include the 58 inspired Flying V. I actually had one of those. It was a beautiful black finish, the only finish they're offering at this time. It's string through, it's a really cool guitar, and it's a great value at $599. But at this point in time, that's the only model that does not have a Gibson counterpart in the original collection. Next up is our Explorer. It kind of has a Gibson counterpart, but they do theirs in natural. But if they were trying to do an original Gibson Explorer, it would have been made of Carina, but these things are pretty cool as well. And then lastly, this three-part collection is the Epiphone Firebird. Now, why is this one so much more special than the other two? It's because Epiphones chug those types of body styles out all the time, but the Firebird is something more relatively new to the Epiphone lineup. There's definitely been Epiphone Firebirds before today, but for the most part, they're artist signature guitars. Like in 2016, Joe Bonamassa had a Firebird 1. That's the version that just has a single mini humbucker in the bridge. And then in 2018, they had that strange Slash Firebird. Looks pretty cool, but definitely not traditional. And in my research on used guitars that have sold on Reverb, I really couldn't find an Epiphone Firebird that looked like this that wasn't made, 10 plus years ago. So the fact that this is now available is definitely attractive to people that like the Firebird shape. And out of all the Gibson models, I think the Firebird has to be the least loved and talked about in the Gibson lineup. I mean, there's definitely a cult following, but when you ask what is your favorite Gibson instrument, it's usually the Les Paul, SG, Flying V, or Explorer. This poor guy gets left out. Even me, myself, a big Gibson fan, I've never actually done a proper review of a Gibson Firebird. I've always thought they were cool, just never happened to check one out. So this bad boy is being offered for $599. That's actually a really good deal for a Firebird styled instrument because these things are built differently than all other Gibson guitars. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. Before today, your only options were off-brand guitars within this price range, because the Gibsons brand new were about $2,000, but you could choose from an LTD Phoenix around $899. There's also another brand called Diamond Hailfire. Those range anywhere from $649 to $849, or you can get a Chinese knockoff for about $300 on AliExpress. So here's the big question. Do you get the Chinese knockoff for $300, or do you get the official Chinese knockoff for twice the price at $600? Because these are also made in China. But just as a little bit of Firebird information, I mean, these things were introduced in the 60s, and there's two different body styles you should be aware of. There's the non-reverse and reverse Firebird. Which one is this one? Put your answer down in the comment section below. If you said non-reverse because this is the Firebird that you instantly think of when you think Firebird, you're actually wrong. This is the reverse Firebird. But it would be interesting to see Epiphone bring out a non-reverse Firebird in the future. They're likely just gauging the market with this one to begin with. So what are my first impressions on this thing? I've got to say, this thing looks the part. It's got two wings with a raised centerpiece. I mean, it definitely looks like a neck-through construction guitar. We've got the two mini humbuckers, as these guys traditionally have. You've got a bridge and tailpiece setup. I mean, you even have the little Firebird emblem on the pickguard. I mean, you can't really have a Firebird without that. You've got the cool Firebird headstock with tuners on the back, and you do have a multi-piece neck on here. And feeling it, since I haven't had a ton of Firebirds, this is a really wide feeling guitar. It's really large, kind of like an Explorer. And the neck profile is noticeably slim, but it doesn't necessarily have that huge D-shaped neck that Epiphones are kind of known for. This feels to me more like a C shape, so that's a pleasant surprise for me. And since this doesn't get any type of modified headstock style, this really does look like a Gibson if you were just to put a Gibson truss rod cover on here. That's kind of what I thought, but then I took a look at the other Gibson Firebird I just happened to have. Now, this is an anniversary model. Most of them are not gold. They don't get gold hardware. But, you know, just looking at your control layout, everything's looking good there. Your pickups, everything's looking good. Bridge, tailpiece, obviously you have metric on this and the standard Gibson on that. But your pick guards, they're about the same shape. Everything's looking good on this thing until you get to the headstock. It never dawned on me. These guys do not get this black veneer over top of it and then the finish on the other areas. And you're also going to notice that the tuners are in different locations. So the original Firebirds, they actually have straight string pull. So you should technically get better tuning stability on these guys because it would be easier to set the nut up properly. Whereas the Epiphone version does not. It's kind of like the non-reverse Firebird styles because they do come in at a slight angle. Now, why is that? Why did they choose to do it? I mean, we get the cosmetic differences. They got to cut the price down somehow, but they use different style tuners. Now, the original Firebird 5s, they actually use these giant tuners. You can see them right there. But the more modern ones use these Steinberger tuners. And since they don't have to stick off the side of the headstock so you can actually tune the thing, that allows them to be placed, you know, in the middle of the headstock and still be able to work. Whereas these guys, they need it to stick off the side or else, you know, you're not going to be able to tune your instrument. So the truss rod covers themselves, they're about the same. It's just missing that veneer and the extra finish to really give it that Firebird 5 style. But remember, even on a good day, a used Firebird 5 is like $1,250. So you're still under half the value of a used Gibson Firebird for a brand new Epiphone. So these really are seeming like a good deal. But here's the big controversy over this model that everybody wants to know. Is it actually a neck-through guitar, or is this a fancy veneer that's making it look like it? Because the Epiphone spec sheet, it does say it's neck-through. It's built the traditional way of a Firebird 5. However, if you go to dealers' websites, many of them will say it's a set neck. Set neck means it's been glued in, there's a joint right here. Neck-through means this whole entire piece is your neck, and they just add the body wings. So the only way to find out for sure is to throw this guy on the workbench and answer that question. The moment of truth. Is it actually a neck through? Who's got the spec sheets right? Yep, it's a true neck through design. So the way you can tell, I mean, unless they went all out and really put a veneer inside of the pickup cavities too, I'm going to say that this thing is built the way that traditional Firebirds are built here. So what this is a 9-ply sandwich of mahogany and walnut stripes. You know how sometimes we talk about the 5-piece maple necks, they've got 2 stripes of walnut going down them? It's essentially the same philosophy right here, except for you have 4 stripes of walnut and 5 parts mahogany. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the way that they join these other mahogany bits to it, we're not going to be able to see it on this example because they've sprayed the edges black, but it's like a triangle shape and they just kind of inlay it there and then glue it in. But there we go. It is official now. It is a neck-through guitar, but that doesn't mean the Epiphone website got all the other specs right. It's claiming it has a rosewood fretboard in one area, and then the other one it tells you it's Indian Laurel. All these new Epiphones have the Indian Laurel fretboards. But let's go ahead and take a look at these pickups. Another area where they made a boo-boo. They call them Pro Buckers, and they show you a picture of a humbucker on the website. But no, these are the Pro Bucker FB720 model pickups. And they were just trying to emulate the original sound of the hot mini humbuckers that these guys come with. But they have a little metal ring, and the bridge pickup actually gets a black spacer that kind of helps it so it sits up taller, so it makes it a little bit easier to get the height that you want. I know ES295s use something kind of similar to this, but even more extensive in order to get the pickup to the right height. But as far as the cavities themselves, it looks like we have some sort of marking right there, and our typical little barcode thing in there. As far as our pickup ratings go, middle position, 3.94. Bridge, we're looking at 7.89, so that's not much hotter than a regular humbucker here. Yeah, 7.89 in the neck position as well. But moving on here, our bridge is just the standard Epiphone style. It says Epiphone on the back, and it's ABR1 in style, which means it mounts on like this, and it is the kind that grips into place. Same thing with your tailpiece. This appears to be full weight. It's also Epiphone branded and has the lock tones. As far as the control layout goes, same as on a Les Paul or SG. 2 volumes, 2 tones, and your output jack is right here on the front. But here's what's kind of interesting. What does it look like underneath a Firebird pickguard? This is the first one I think I've actually torn apart. Yeah, just kind of looks like an Explorer. You've got a little channel right there and then a large one right there. But what's kind of nice about that being such a big channel is if you wanted to, you could do a bunch of different modifications. Like if you wanted a kill switch in here, you just have to route away your Firebird thing, but then you could have a kill switch on it. There's definitely enough room there to do something fun. But now we move on to the neck. Indian laurel fretboard is correct. Does it really feel that much different from rosewood? It just has a little bit more grain to it that you can kind of feel if you rub your nail along it. I honestly haven't had too many complaints about these new Epiphones as far as the fretboard material goes. It feels good enough to me. But we've got 22 medium jumbo frets, your standard 12-inch radius. We'll go ahead and grab our neck specs though. 1.69 inches at the nut, and then by the 12th, yeah, wow, that's pretty wide, 2.1. First fret neck depth, 0.84, and by the 12th, a solid 1. Epiphone's website calls this a slim C shape. You can see it has a little bit of D territory once you get to the 12th fret. But basically what I feel is it starts off like super slim and rounded, but then it gets a little bit fatter towards that 12th. It's actually a pretty comfortable neck. But our inlays are clear acrylic plastic. Now moving on to our headstock here. So this is what it looks like without the truss rod cover on it, and the truss rod cover itself, really flimsy material, but at least they put something on here, right? But look what I found sleeping under here. Yeah, so they chipped the veneer, I don't know, probably routing it for this, and they're like, it's covered by that. Don't worry about it, don't worry about it. So that's slightly questionable, but out of sight, out of mind. The only other bad finish thing that I could find is where the main neck portion meets the body wings, they do a dark spray. But right here you can see where it's not quite level. So it almost looks like the finish is chipped, but it hasn't. It's just they didn't spray that area. It's not overly apparent, but you definitely know about it once you see it. But other than that, there's not too much more to go over on the headstock, but that is where your truss rod is if you need to adjust it. And as far as the frets, I mean, this one's okay. I think I'll have to put a little bit more relief in the neck because there's some light fret buzzing as these new Epiphones typically have. Sometimes you have to do some fret leveling. It just depends on the example. The only good thing about that chip is we can see the mahogany walnut sandwich right there a little bit more clearly. Now moving on to the back, there's not too much else to see here. Same mahogany wings with that whole neck through construction. You do have a very slight comfort cut hidden away within that dark finish. And then you do have your pot control cavity in here. So this is supposed to have CTS pots. Let's see if they're telling the truth. Yep, looks like we're all good here. 500K CTS with the large orange drop capacitors. It's the typical layout that we have been seeing, so they're actually on a quick connect system that is hand soldered directly to the pots. So you still have the option to swap out the pickups if you wanted to route it out for humbuckers or something and not have to modify your wiring. You just have to unclip and then reclip. But so far these cavities actually look pretty darn good. Oh, and nice, we even have shielding on the back plate here. But our strap buttons, just in case you've never had a Firebird before, you got one down here and then one at the base of the heel of the neck. Then moving up the neck here. So you get a dark heel, just kind of a cosmetic thing, I guess, since they're not even trying to hide any join lines. And then you get the beautiful tobacco burst neck, and you can see all the pieces in there. It really is quite the impressive sight. Then you get our handcrafted in China sticker and quality control inspection. And then our serial number is right here. So for Epiphones, it's the first two tell you what year. So this is a 2019 made in November. And then instead of the banjo style or the Steinberger style, they put these mini Grovers on here. And it might not be perfect straight string pull, but they did the best that they could. It just kind of comes in at a slight angle. And our last spec to capture is the weight. It feels pretty light, and it is 7 pounds, 2.1 ounces. But let's go ahead, plug this Epiphone in, and hear how it sounds. Now that we know all about the Epiphone Firebird, what are my final thoughts on this thing? One thing I noticed right away is that there is a little bit less output out of this guitar as compared to like my humbucker equipped instruments, so I had to raise the volume on my amp about 1.5, and then it just kind of sounded like everything else. But this bridge pickup is ultra thin sounding. Like on the clean channel, I wasn't a huge fan of it, but once you get that overdriven tone, it's that old-timey, you know, blues rock type stuff, so that is a great pickup for that. But the neck pickup is really where the show is all at for a Firebird. It's so nice and juicy, both in the clean as well as distorted channels. And then that middle position is just kind of a combination between the two of them. And it gets that very signature Firebird chimey sound to it. So these are kind of Telecaster-like in a way. I could see somebody pulling off some country licks as well as the blues licks on these guys. Whenever I think Firebirds though, I think Johnny Winter, so that's why I tried to pay tribute to him with my demo today. But one thing I do want to mention, besides just the output levels, it seems the B string is not as loud as the other strings on this guitar. And it's not just for the neck pickup, it's not just for the bridge pickup, it's not when you strum it acoustically. For whatever reason, that B string is just not as loud amplified. It makes no sense to me because it can't be both pickups being weird. But in order to counteract that B string, what I did is I slanted the pickups. So maybe that string needs replaced or something, I don't know. But as far as QC goes, we saw it on the workbench. There's a few finish blemishes on this guy, like that chip underneath the truss rod cover, and that uneven black line that runs along the neck through in the body. But other than that, the only thing I can really complain about is this switch. If they're doing quality CTS pots, I wish we could get a high quality Switchcraft switch in here, because listen to this. That's the switch moving around. It's just kind of annoying. I mean, most people aren't really flopping their guitars around like this, but it would be nice if they gave us a quality switch instead of one that just kind of moves all around. Because that's like the only weak link as far as the electronics go. I mean, you could potentially upgrade your pickups later on, but I didn't think there were anything that needed to go right away. And then as far as the setup on this guitar, I thought it was pretty okay out of the box. I sighted the neck and it was actually backbowed. So instead of, you know, having some relief, it was the opposite. So it's like, okay, we better put some relief in there. And once I did that, then most of the fret buzz went away. I mean, these Epiphones are never 100% perfect. I mean, you could do some fret leveling jobs here and there to make it play perfect, but I thought this was acceptable out of the box. I mean, now that I've had so many of these brand new Epiphones, I kind of know what to expect, but I don't think most people would have issues playing this thing as is. But one last thing I want to talk about is the neck profile description from Epiphone is a little bit misleading. They call it a 60C neck, and it does have that C neck profile shape. But as you get up here, like the 12th fret, this is what I would consider like a really fat baseball bat neck, except for it still has the C shape instead of getting super full. So yes, it is the C-shaped neck, but it does get pretty chunky as you get up here. I don't think anybody's going to have any issues playing this, but it's just something to kind of keep in mind. So would I ultimately recommend the Epiphone Firebird? Yeah. This was a quality guitar. I had a good time checking it out. I have not had many Gibson Firebirds to compare it to, but for the price point, I was happy that there were very few things that made me sad about this guitar. I mean, had this actually been a set neck and not neck through, this review would have been way different, but at least they kept the construction the same. So let's go ahead and check it out under Blacklight before we say goodbye. As far as Blacklight goes, we get a light greenish glow, but it's that pickguard that steals the show here. Well, this is mainly just for fun. It's a brand new guitar. There's not going to be any hidden breaks, cracks, or repairs, right? Right? You know, it kind of just hit me. Most of these Epiphones have scarf joints and stuff, but this one, you know, it's true neck through, so there isn't any of that shenanigans going on. So in many ways, this might be the best value within the Epiphone range as far as construction goes, being closer to the original Gibsons. If you purchase one of these brand new and have it shipped to you, this is the box it'll come with. Unfortunately, these do not come with cases. You can purchase them separately. I think they're $119. So that's not too bad. But inside here, this kind of secures it into place, and you get some other packing material, but you could use it as a makeshift case if you didn't want to purchase one. Just good enough for storage, not necessarily the best protection if you want to take it gig to gig. I mean, you could install a handle, but that's probably more effort than it's worth. If you think it might be interesting being the next owner of this Epiphone Firebird, sorry, it's already spoken for, but I can probably get you a deal on another new one. The only problem is right now these are currently only pre-orders. It's kind of hard to find these guys in stock. But you can check out my Do Guitar Day program on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. Thank you, Troglodytes, for tuning in today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.